Happy New Year, folks. Happy 2023, and hoping this New Year's off to a fantastic start to everybody listening in. We got a really special guest in the house today, a real Lankan kolla, born and bred in the UK though. But we got the very special Nihal Arthanayake on the show. Aya, Happy New Year, and Ayubowan.
Ayabuan to you. Suba alataru takveva Akash
Yes,
Mali.
same aveva.
Yeah, how are you, man?
Good, buddy. So amazing to have you on the show. Like I was telling you earlier, I came across your name quite recently. Most of the people we've had on the podcast are filmmakers, film-related personalities, but when it came to you, although you're not directly related to film, I know for a fact that you do interviews, you've written books, and probably, correct me if I'm wrong, at heart, you seem like you're a storyteller. So I really, really wanted to get you on the show. So here we are. Thanks again for agreeing to come on the show, man.
No, Akash Mali is cool, man. It's cool. Yeah, it's really interesting you say that because when people ask me what I do, because I'm an author, podcaster, broadcaster, journalist, I usually just condense all of that just to say I'm in the storytelling business. That's what I'm in.
Yeah.
Rather than, I guess, telling stories, even though I do tell stories to help link into guests, etc., etc. Primarily, I'm there to facilitate other people telling stories. So, in that
Hmm.
respect, rather than the writer director, I'm the producer of a movie. If you put it into that context, I'm the one that's kind of helping people to tell their stories.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it because uh, when it comes to what you do, interviewing, radio presenting, all that, sometimes it's on the go, and maybe although you've done research on a guest, uh, it probably tends to be the fact that you're gonna have to improvise as things go along, and you figure out, okay, this person's giving me a little bit more information than I thought was gonna come through, and which direction am I gonna steer the narrative in? How do you tackle this?
So, my style of interviewing, Akash, is that I do the research, then I store it up here, and I'll make notes of it, which will help me to store it up here.
Hmm.
And then I always think of the first question that I want to ask. From that point on, I don't have any questions written down. I am led by the interviewee. They then will say something which I may be able to draw upon and widen out because of a nugget of knowledge that I have about them because of the research that I've done. So
Gotcha.
it's not structured. I never write down any questions beforehand. The first question is always in my mind. I'm thinking about it. I think about it a lot. Try and work out how is it that I want to get into this conversation.
Hmm.
And then it's free form. It's a genuine conversation in that I have to be listening to what you're saying, Akash. Otherwise, it won't work for me. It won't work for you as the interviewee, and it won't really work for the audience because rather than a conversation, it would just sound like a job interview.
Hmm. That's very true. Uh, you also, you done DJing.
Yeah,
I'm trying to go back.
my my turntables are set up there. That you can't
Nice.
really see them, but you can't there. In fact, it's really weird you say that because today, for the first time in months, I just started DJing again. I really want to.
Yeah.
I think it's really good for my mental health
Hmm.
to just lose myself in beats. So I've started again. Yeah, I just started messing around with Cardi B and J Cole, and just kind of mixing that up and getting that going.
Nice.
Yeah,
Planning on releasing anything anytime soon?
yeah. No, I'm not about that. I mean, there's only so much you can do, and I'm old now. Like the last thing I want to do is be a kind of middle aged. I definitely would like to DJ again. I'd definitely like to do some more DJing gigs, but I'm definitely not going to be producing any beats. No, I've got
Gotcha.
books to write. I've got another book to write this year, which will be out next
Hmm.
year. So that will listen. Writing a book takes so much time. And it takes so much time if you don't have a full time job. But I have a full time job as a radio broadcaster. So
Yeah.
writing a book is even more. You know, yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine like how daunting that must be. At times you probably want to pull your hair out in frustration.
Yeah, it feels like that, Akash. The hardest
Yeah.
thing is, like with anything, um, the hardest thing is just doing it.
Hmm.
It's just actually doing it. And it took me the longest time. I'm a procrastinator, so I just kept putting it off and off and off and making excuses. And
I guess that's probably the
yeah,
Sri Lankan gene in you.
yeah, maybe, yeah, we're island people, right? Everything we're chill about a lot of things, right? We are chill
Yeah.
about a lot of things. We're relaxed about a lot of things. But I almost feel like I have to wait until almost I'm in panic mode, right?
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
had a long time. I had a long time to write the book, but everything had to be done last minute. I think I delivered the final. I think I delivered final after all the edits, then the copy editor, like 3 or 4 months before it was released. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it was late. It was really late. I'll try and be a
I
bit better
guess
this time.
I guess we kind of like the whole thrill, the deadline, the ticking clock, the whole thriller element of it.
Yeah, I think yeah, it just focuses my mind. Otherwise, I'm kind of really easily distracted. There's a number of people in my life who feel that I'm undiagnosed with ADHD. Like they
Yeah.
think that I'm probably that guy. Because I do find it very hard to kind of. I'm like, what we doing? What we do? I mean, that's why radio kind of works for me because it's 12 hours a week, constant,
Mm.
constant. But a book isn't that. A book is
Yeah.
you have a year. You really have to build it and then knock it down sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Remembering always that the first sentence that you commit to your computer isn't going to be the finished article. It's not. So
Exactly.
all of those things are kind of difficult.
Your book, Let's Talk, How to Have Better Conversations. Talk to me about that. Like what have you learned from the process of writing a book besides uh, not wanting to procrastinate?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I've learned, and you'll understand this being in Sri Lanka, is is that you have to find common ground, and you
Hmm.
can find common ground even with people that you would consider to be your enemies. And the way the world is going is pushing us towards thinking that, you know, if there's 20% of something that I disagree with someone on, then I'll focus on that and I will make sure that that is who they are. I will define them entirely by that which I disagree with them with. And you
Mm.
can't do that, right? You just can't. You can't. I think I quote in the book Ronald Reagan, the former president of the United States of America, who said that my 80% friend isn't my 20% enemy. So
Hmm.
that which you part company on, you don't have to persuade everybody, right? You don't have to agree with everything. But what you do have to do is be civil and to try and understand. And you also have to be conscious of your own prejudices. So, in Sri Lanka and the politics of Sri
Hmm.
Lanka, Sinhalese, Tamil, all of that, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, all of those things require calm, patient, nuance, empathy. As soon as people are trying to get you angry, you must automatically mistrust those people because they are exploiting you for their own gain, right? People who are trying to
Hmm.
make you angry rather than trying to build bridges, you have to be very cautious of. And I think I learned a lot of that in the book by interviewing people that were involved in the Northern Ireland peace process, interviewing someone who made a documentary about American neo Nazis, even though she is a brown woman, a Muslim.
Hmm.
And I learned about trying to stay calm in situations where people are trying to goad you, where they're trying to
Yeah.
get a reaction out of you because they're trying to feed off that negative energy.
Yeah. I really like what you said, about being aware of your own prejudices because it's so rarely that we are ever taught to, reflect or look inside of our own selves and critically analyze what we've been taught. It
Yeah,
you know
it's true.
even as a creative person, like it's never taught. It's something that you kind of like pick up along the way. Where at what point, being born to Sri Lankan parents over there in the UK, at what point did you kind of, if at all, right? If at all, start seeing the prejudices that was subliminally programmed into you?
I think as far back as I can remember, I've resisted the urge to say Tamils are, right?
Mm.
Or Muslims are. As soon as you start boiling down an entire group to one type of behavior, you have to seriously question that, right? Because people are individuals.
The generalization of it.
Yeah, and I'm lucky because I grew up in a household which wasn't like that. They weren't like singular nationalists, right? They're
Mm.
proud Sri Lankans, but I've always said Sri Lankan. And when people ask me, "Oh, are you Sinhalese or Buddhist?" I'm like, "I'm Sri Lankan." I mean, you can tell by my surname what I am,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure I like the question, the follow-up question about, "Oh yeah, are you
Mm.
Sinhalese or Buddhist?" Because
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people on both sides, and I've seen it here in the UK, especially amongst certain sections of the Tamil diaspora, and they're just spoiling for a fight. They want
Mm.
to remain constantly angry. But even in places like South Africa, you've seen that no good comes from that. No good comes from you being permanently angry. At some point, you have to be calm to talk to someone. You have to be. And I'm really proud of Sri Lanka and how they got rid of the Rajapaksas in a relatively bloodless way. I mean, we've seen around the world, look at Syria, for instance,
Mm.
where people have tried to rise up against their government, and it's worked out very, very badly for them. And it has been blood curdlingly bad
Yeah.
for everybody involved, right? But Sri Lanka didn't do that, you know. Sri Lankans didn't do that, and I was lucky enough to visit the encampment, um, the whole go to go home area around by the parliament, and just walk through it, and it was
Oh, so you,
incredible.
you were here last year?
Yeah, I came.
Oh wow.
I came when there was no petrol, like literally nothing, because we'd just bought a house.
Hmm.
So I needed to go and see the house. And it was, so I came on my own. Yeah, and I wandered around. I met up with the BBC's Rajani Vaidyanathan, who was based in Delhi. She flew down because she was doing lots of reports on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was amazing. It was an amazing thing to see and to
Yeah.
feel history, right?
Mm. Exactly. And I mean, with the past, I guess 3 4 years. Forget the past 3 4 years. Past 30 40 years have been proper turmoil. I guess as Sri Lankans, the whole chaos. It's just another Tuesday for us. But in a way, that's kind of like what's strengthened us too, I guess, because you know, after a point, you come to a place where like violence is not really an answer.
Yeah, for sure, right?
Yeah.
It does. It just doesn't. I mean, it does in certain aspects. Um, it's terrible, and so many civilians lost their lives. But violence brought an end to a civil war,
That is true.
right?
That
And lots of people paid the
mm,
ultimate price for that. A lot of Tamil civilians died for that peace to happen, and now hopefully Jaffna and those regions in the north and the east can prosper. Although it's going to take Sri Lanka a little bit while to get through the mess that it's in economically. But I don't need to tell you, Mali, Sri Lankans are resilient, right?
oh
Civil
man.
war,
Yeah.
the tsunami, terrorist attacks. Sri Lanka is
Yeah.
such a beautiful country with amazing people. And Sri Lanka always finds a way of coming back because resourceful, resilient, clever, and just have so many amazing natural resources. to be able to draw upon, and I think it's incumbent on people like me, to make sure that people know about Sri Lanka, that it doesn't just disappear. So when
Yeah.
those things were happening, I'm on a big mainstream radio station here. I was covering that story almost every day. I was making sure the world knew about Sri Lanka.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, as Sri Lankans, like you said very correctly, we are resilient, and those out there with a particular following, I guess, it is a responsibility to let the world know what the ground situation is, because there's so much fake news going
Yeah,
around as
well,
well.
that's the problem, and all those Facebook groups which are spreading lies, and
Mm.
that's got to be, you've got to be very, very careful where you get your news from, and you have to cross-reference it. Everybody that reads a news story or reads just a headline, doesn't even read the story, and gets
Yeah.
angry. You have to just take a pause and say, okay, could this be a lie? Let me go and research it a bit more. Let me spend 5 minutes on it as opposed to 30 seconds on it, just to kind of see, actually, does that cross-reference? Does that make sense? And also, just beware of charlatans, right? Like people
Yeah.
that don't believe that climate change is happening.
Mm.
You need to ignore those people. Even if they're a scientist and they say that man-made climate change or human-made climate change is not happening, we are not in a climate crisis. The fact is, over 90% of the scientific community says it is happening. So go with them, right? Like, just don't be fooled by people who are trying to kind of monetize your fears and insecurities, because there's just so much of that, Akash, that's happening.
There's a lot of that. I really like what you said before, about the whole cross-referencing, and it's kind of similar in a way to researching. So I kind of just want to pull you back to
Mm.
researching on guests, researching on whatever you're writing, researching on topic. Is there anything in particular that you feel like you're doing uniquely?
I think one of the things that listeners always tell me
Hmm.
um, is that I'm listening, like I'm actively listening to the person that's speaking to me. And they seem to find that quite unusual, because I think a lot of people in my game, they're just waiting to ask the next question.
Mm.
So rather than listening to what you're saying, they're preparing for their next question, right? Which they've probably got, preordained. I'm not doing that. So I'm really listening to you. And I genuinely, I care about you, right? Like, I'm interested. I
Yeah.
know that you have a story, and it's my job to help you tell it. And sometimes I get quite emotional while doing that. So I think I ask human questions,
Mm.
and so when I interviewed Oliver Stone, whose book I think is here somewhere. It's called Chasing the Light. Yeah, it's there, Chasing the Light by Oliver
Yeah.
Stone. When I interviewed him, he even, like 15 minutes into the interview, he stopped and he said, "Look, I'm going to have to recalibrate, because this is a very psychological interview, and I wasn't really prepared for that." But it was good. He loved it. He put it on his social media, and he really loved the interview. But it just, whether it's Benedict Cumberbatch, Lin-Manuel Miranda, they seem to. I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch said to me, because I bumped into him after the interview a few months later, and he remembered me. We sat next to each other at this dinner, and he said, "You made me feel seen." So often I think they do these interviews, and the interviewer doesn't really, like, he's not
And
almost listening.
that's come from Benedict Cumberbatch, someone who's perpetually on screen. He's
Yeah,
telling you that he felt seen.
yeah, right. It made me feel seen, because I was like, I genuinely wanted to know about his process and who he was, and the kind of the traces that characters leave with him, and how he's been, like,
Mm.
just we just went in, we had 45 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. I mean, like, for the record, when I got in touch with you and I told you I'll send you a list of questions later, like tentative ones, you were like, "No, I don't need any questions. Just Let me know the date and time. That's it.
Yeah.
So I didn't really prepare anything per se. I just went through whatever was up there about you, and I'm like, I'm just gonna approach this the way I just, point back.
Yeah, it's just a
Here
conversation,
we are.
Akash, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't need, I'm a grown up, right? Like, you're not trying to trip me up.
Mm,
You're just asking me about me, and I'm pretty much the world's greatest expert on me, right?
exactly.
So, I've got really nothing to fear from this, and it's much nicer to be genuinely kind of taken aback by a question,
Mm,
to have to go, okay, rather than say, oh, I've got all my answers well
answers
rehearsed.
for yeah.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I worked for Elton John, and I remember Elton John never. I don't think he ever. I mean, there were certain times where you'd be told, "Look, don't talk about that because that's private." But I don't
Mm,
think we ever sent him questions up front. Not as far as I can remember.
wow. In all your years of interviewing people, I don't know like what the number is at right now, but is there anything, with people who are successful in their field, people who've gone on to do great things, is there anything common that you noticed which you've in turn integrated into your day-to-day life as well?
I guess not so much that I've integrated it into my own life,
Mm-hmm.
because the people that I tend to interview, or a lot of the people I tend to interview, I'm trying to think about, because I've interviewed so many different people, and there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of psychological damage or upheaval. There's a lot of success, single-mindedness, focus. So
I
they're
guess it's hard
very
to generalize
inspiring.
again.
Yeah, because it's just such a look. I mean, I've got a podcast on BBC Sounds, and there are over 350 interviews that I've done on that.
Oh,
Right,
wow.
right, like probably nearing 400. Is crazy. I mean, if you think I'm doing an interview, at least one Monday to Thursday every day. So that's 4 a week. So
Mm,
that's 200 a year at least. 200 a year, and I've been there now 6 years, right? So actually in terms of the amount of interviews I've done, just on this station alone is probably like 1,000. So, you know, there's so many different people, and you just kind of you think a lot about overcoming certain things. You become very empathetic. That's one
yeah.
thing I've learned, is that everybody has a story. Everybody. You, me, everybody. You just got to give people space, and and confidence is such an important thing. I think that's one thing I've learned as well, is to be confident in your skill set. All the successful people I know, even though they've got anxieties and insecurities, when it comes to delivering on their job, they're like, boom, I know what I'm doing. And similarly, when
Mm,
I interview someone, I'm one of the best at it in the world, I think. Genuinely. I mean,
no doubt.
Ricky Gervais tweeted about me a couple of years ago, you know, how
Yeah.
much he enjoys being interviewed by me. So, this is a guy with 15 million Twitter followers, you know. So,
Yeah.
but, it sounds immodest and arrogant to say, oh, I think I'm one of the best. But I've been doing it a long time, and I do
I
it a
think you've
lot.
earned the bragging rights by now.
Well, I mean, you just have to go, okay, well, if I wasn't brilliant at it by now, then I should give up, because I've been doing it
Mm,
for so long and I do so much of it. You've got to be, you've got to try. It's like you just keep practicing penalties. You can't miss
mm,
those penalties, right? When you step up to kick that ball, if you've been practicing doing nothing but fast bowling, right? You're a seamer and you're just doing it and
mm,
doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. You have to be taking wickets. Otherwise,
mm.
why are you there? Right?
Exactly.
Right. Similarly, I need to be taking wickets. Every time I step into the microphone and someone's opposite me, I'm going out. You know what I mean? I'm going out to either hit sixes or take wickets. That's what I'm going out to do, right?
Yeah. Brings to mind that saying, I don't fear the man that has practiced 10,000 kicks one time, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times.
Mm. Right, right,
Yeah.
right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, you're just doing it and doing it and doing it. And in that time, you've interviewed, you know, physicists like Carlo Rovelli, or clinical psychologists like Jordan B. Peterson,
John Peterson,
or
yeah.
or Hollywood actors like Matthew McConaughey. All these people that have come into my life for 45 minutes or an hour and then go out of my life. And through that time, I guess you're touched by all of them, really, in some way.
Yeah. And there was this saying that a friend of mine told me this, like in casual conversation one day when we were talking about people. She was like, "You know what, Akash? People are not black or white." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, like they're gray, right? They're shades of gray." She's like, "No, people are not black, white, shades of gray either. People are just colorful," and that
Yeah.
stuck with me to this day.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. I get that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
People are colorful. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're trying to be, right? You're trying to be. And I think part of the problem becomes when you don't feel colorful anymore, right?
Hmm.
Where you feel like you are just shades of gray. And that happens to a lot of men around my age, because this is the stage where you have to think to yourself, okay, I've got more career behind me than I have in front of me in
Hmm.
terms of years. So how have I done thus far? And I'm kind of good
Hmm.
with that. You know, the fact that my first book came out last year is great. That means I've got a second book to focus towards. So that's another milestone. And there'll be a third, maybe. Um, so as long as you keep moving forward, you should be good. You should keep that color. Yeah.
Yeah. Keeping the color alive. And in this day and age, like, with all the bombardment with the news, social media, all that
Mhm.
tends to become a bit of a comparing game. And I guess it's even more prevalent over there where you live. How do you kind of at any point, just block the noise out? Because I feel like we live in an age of overabundance. Like, we're not really trying to choose between like one or two things. It's like a whole load of things, like a proper buffet where you are really, really confused on what are you going to choose. And that's how
Yeah.
the information's like kind of flowing in too. Is there anything that you do to kind of like filter out all that noise, just focus in on like
It's
one
hard
thing?
because I do have a lot of FOMO. Like, I do kind of look at other people in my game and say, okay, they're more successful. Are they more successful than me? They're
Mm-hmm.
doing, um, and ultimately you have to focus on what you're doing, right? You can't be
Yeah.
distracted. So that's always a battle, I think, to a certain extent. It's just kind of making sure you're not distracted by other people's gains and other people's wins. You're trying to get your own wins. You can only really do that by focusing on what you need to and handling your own business. So, I'm lucky enough that I'm doing a record company. I'm hosting a record company showcase on Wednesday next week in London for a part of Sony Music. And then on Friday at 7 o'clock in
Oh,
the morning, I fly to Germany to go to Mont Blanc, the luxury pen makers, because Mont Blanc and I have a really,
I see the
yeah,
title behind you.
yeah, we have a really, really strong relationship. They helped me with my book sales. All my notebooks are all Mont Blanc. So I've just been,
Fancy.
I'm a huge fan of them, and they're very
Mm.
supportive of me. So when my book was launched, um, they heavily supported the book. They really, really supported the book, which has been fantastic for me. So that's just next week, right? I've got to write an article for a supermarket magazine that I write for here in the UK. this weekend. I've also got to judge a books prize, which is Murky Books, which is owned by Stormzy, the rapper. I'm
Hmm.
a judge for his book prize. So, it's varied. Like that's all the color in my life, right? It's and rather than me
Yeah.
going, oh yeah, but so and so's doing that and so's there and so like just focus on all that. Those four things to get amazing. They're amazing that I get a chance to do those things, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing that I'm given the opportunity to go and meet so many interesting people, and be around music and be around literature and be around art. Is I'm going to stick to that color. But I'll be lying if I didn't say that sometimes I'll look on Instagram at someone else's thing and go, "Oh wow, they seem to be doing really well." You know,
Mm.
you know.
I guess none of us can escape human nature, but it's always
Mhm.
helpful to be mindful about it all and be grateful for what you
Yeah,
got.
yeah, exactly, exactly. It's you've got to be grateful for what you got. I think that's a very important thing, Akash. Yeah, I mean, as Buddhists say, desire is suffering, right?
Yeah,
So, you just got to be relaxed and just get on with what you're doing. Keep your eyes on the prize, as it were.
exactly. And just so because you mentioned that, like, the whole, I feel like I sense the enthusiasm in your voice when you talk about what you do, right? Like, I've sensed this in the interviews I've listened to, all of that. And in a way, the reason I kind of got you on board is again for because of my own personal curiosity. Here was a man who's done all these interviews. He's interviewing somebody new every single day, and yet seems to maintain the same enthusiasm all throughout. So in a way, this entire session is for me to kind of like pick your brain, see you know what makes you tick, and I'm starting to see that. Uh, I kind of lost my train of thought saying
That's
this,
all right.
but
I think just
yeah.
to interrupt you for a second, though, the key to all of that, Akash, is curiosity. That's
Hmm.
the word, right? It's not
Curiosity, yeah.
it's not energy or focus or anything. Everything follows curiosity. You have to be curious about the world. You have to look around you and say, well, why is he saying that? Or why is she doing that? Or how was that built? Or how did you get to this place? How are you a success? What are the failures that you had? All of those things is curiosity, curiosity, curiosity. Because in a world that's constantly changing, where we are going to be battling against artificial intelligence for our own
Hmm.
jobs, what will keep us going? Curiosity will keep us going. The need to want
Hmm.
to learn more and to understand more. And there's so much information out there in the world, it can be overwhelming. So you've got to kind of distill that and find what makes you interested, but just remain curious. Don't lose that childhood wonder. Try and remember what it felt like to walk out into a forest and just listen to all these sounds. I mean, Sri Lanka, especially the house we have, because it's quite tucked away in the countryside, the sounds are amazing. It's like you probably don't hear it because you hear it all the time. But when
Exactly.
I when I someone I interviewed someone and he's obsessed with trees, and he said, you know what? Once in a while, sit at the bottom of a tree. Just sit at the
Hmm.
base of a tree, no music, no headphones, and just listen to everything that's going on around you. Actually, listen
Hmm.
to it, right? The sounds of the birds. You may even hear insects, people talking, traffic, whatever.
Yeah.
Take some time out to give your head space, right? Don't constantly
Hmm.
think that even though you're curious, you also need to give your mind space, which means don't feel guilty for doing nothing. There has to be points
Hmm.
where you do nothing. You are blessed to be in one of the most beautiful countries on earth. Drive down to Hika, walk along the beach, you know, don't talk to anyone. Don't put your headphones in. Just sit and watch the sea rolling in and rolling out. And when you do that, it will declutter your mind and that will give you fresh impetus to be curious again.
I don't know, it feels like a golden nugget of wisdom because you're essentially talking about living in the now.
I think, yeah, but also I'm saying don't don't feel like doing nothing is important. Like
Hmm.
giving yourself space and time. So all of these things that are going on in your head, there's this brilliant book called Stolen Focus by Johan Hari. It should be up here somewhere. And it's so good, and it's all about how our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, and that we have to
Hmm.
be aware of that. Stop. And I'm addicted to this, right? Yeah, this is a drug. This is like crack cocaine. Like you have to just get rid of this at times. You have to just go, no, I don't want it. In fact, there it is. Look, just throwing it away. I don't want it. Right? Like because
Yeah.
it can be really, really bad for you. Like, don't bring
True.
it out when you're meeting up with your friends and put it on the table. In my book,
Hmm.
there's research that shows that you will have less of a quality conversation if you put your phone down on the table while you sit down. Like, be
It's true.
mindful of this stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
That's living in the
totally.
moment.
Exactly. I agree with you, like 100%. Like, it's sometimes like you feel like you're looking for some sort of, I don't know, some heavenly interference or some sort of inspiration from somewhere. But the fact remains that all basic truths are so simple, and it's stuff that you already know deep down.
Mm.
But again, you're not really listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it takes the conversation to open up your ears and your mind.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, mobile phones are designed, or the apps are designed to keep us
Mm.
looking as long as possible. The longer
Mm.
we look, the more adverts, you know? It's their
Yeah,
business model. They're monetizing our eyes,
yeah,
right? That's what they've done, right?
yep,
They've put a price on our eyeballs, and the longer we spend staring at these screens, the longer um, they can start charging advertisers. That's fine. I mean, that's their business model. I don't hate on it, but it's you have a choice as to how many hours you spend, and I spend way
exactly.
too many, way too many.
It's nice to hear somebody actually say that, like admit to it that, yeah, I know this is something that I do, but it's something that is inherently not good because we don't
It's
really
not
find a lot
good.
of people say that, right?
It's not good. No good will come from it.
Yeah.
No good will come from it.
I, having spoken about all this stuff, I kind of want to ask you like one more thing about, coming from, being born to Sri Lankan parents and having a Sri Lankan background, although you've been born and bred in the UK, is there anything from your cultural roots that kind of has seeped into your work, be it music, the DJing, music, interviewing, anything at all? I'm just curious.
I think I think Buddhism has,
Hmm.
in a weird kind of way, it has centered me. It's not like I go to temple, you know, or read Buddhist tracts or Buddhist philosophy, but I think there was a thing the Lord Buddha said, which is man has no refuge but man. Therefore, you can't just pray away your sins. Like you have to take responsibility for how you behave. And I think that really has stuck with me. Man has no refuge but man.
Mm.
My understanding, my reading of that is that I have to take responsibility. I have to, and
Be held accountable for what you do
yeah,
or say.
for
Yeah.
what you do, right, and how you act, and I'm not perfect, right? Like I fall short sometimes, but I'm just trying. I'm trying to live by that principle, and I think
Mm.
it's not it's not a coincidence that Sri Lanka has been one of the number one tourist destinations in the world. Why? Not just because it's got great beaches, right? and Sigiriya, right? It's not because of that. It's because of the people. Sri Lankan people are hospitable. They're friendly. They're open-hearted, and I think I definitely have inherited that from my mother. You know,
Yeah.
that kind of hospitable. You don't turn up at someone's house empty-handed. No one leaves your house hungry. You know, those that kind
Yeah.
of classic things that Sri Lankan house. Um,
Mm.
so I think, yeah, I think they're definitely things that I would say define a degree of Sri Lankanness. But, you know, it's a constantly moving thing, Akash. You know, I don't speak the language. I haven't lived there. I'm not a particularly good Buddhist. But I am the version of a Sri Lankan that I want to be and that I'm comfortable with. And I don't care if
Yeah.
someone thinks I'm not Sri Lankan enough, or it's not up to them
Mm.
to judge how I
Yeah.
feel, right? Like I don't feel confused being British and Sri Lankan. I'm not
Mm.
wrestling within myself that psychology. I'm very happy
Yeah.
being both when it suits me. Sri Lanka in the cricket, England in the football, Sri Lankan
Mm.
food, you know, chicken kottu and egg godambas, or fish and chips, right? Like I don't,
Mm.
I'm all of those things. I'm all of
Yeah.
those things, right? And
For,
I
yeah.
see a lot of British Asians and they wrestle with this dual identity, but
Mm.
I don't really wrestle with it. I guess I'm more British because look at the way I sound and
Yeah.
everything, but I wear a sarong to bed, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like I walk around the house in a sarong. Like that's my thing to wear a sarong. And I have done for years, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, it is what it is. It's
Mm.
I pick and choose what I want.
True. That's cool. I mean, you just mentioned egg and Godam Baroti. I just brought to mind that for those of you who don't know, Nihal happens to be one of the originators of the "I am so Sri Lankan" meme. If you've seen that video with Jehan R, like I think it was
That
like
was
what
huge,
10.
right?
It was, it was like the memes kept springing up on and off every single year. Probably sometime. I think it was more prevalent around the Aurudu times, the Aurudu
Yeah.
season. Yeah.
Oh, is it really? Is it really? I'm so
Yeah.
Sri
Yeah.
Lankan. The Sri Lankan off was like the bet. We tried to do a second one and it wasn't as good, but that first one
Mhm.
was mad. I remember being in Colombo on New Year's Eve at some massive party, and this group of young guys came up to me and was like, Are you that guy?" And I was like, "Yeah, wow." Right? Because it went viral, right? For Sri Lankans.
Yeah, it did.
Everyone watched me and Jahan having that Sri Lanka off. And it was good. I think it made Sri Lankans feel really kind of validated because there are so many of those things for Indians and Pakistanis, right?
Mm.
But these
Yeah.
things were so specific. I mean, some of the things were a bit like India, like ghee and stuff like that, barter flip flops and things like that. But
Yeah.
some of those things were like moldy fish sambles and egg
Mm.
egg godambas. These are so Sri Lankan. These things, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Like that's a very good point you said, because like for Sri Lankans, we rarely have that form of validation in what we see from the content out there, unless it's created by Sri Lankans. And what you and Jehan did, one of the reasons for the longevity of that meme and that video, I feel, is the fact that they felt validated and they could kind of connect to what was going on in their day-to-day lives. So
Yeah,
probably you guys should, do a new version of it.
maybe, you know, maybe. I've just quickly looked up. I didn't realize there were so many memes. I've just looked at it. Oh my god, there's so many memes.
There are.
Wow.
So glad I brought this to your attention.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so Sri Lankan. I remember the anniversary of the 96 World Cup win better than my wedding anniversary. I'm so Sri Lankan. My amma makes me kiribat for my birthday. I'm so Sri Lankan. My amma can make unlimited cups of welcome drinks from one Sun Quick bottle. So true. Oh damn. There's so many of them.
That's part of your legacy, man.
Yeah, I know, right? Like I've given one thing to the Sri Lankan community. I'm so Sri Lankan. Wow. Wow. Oh my god, that's great. I'm
Nihal,
so Sri
bro,
Lankan.
thank you so much for doing this. When you're down here, guys, everyone listening to Junkyard Theory, when Nihal's down here next, I'm gonna try and get him on a live show and a physically recorded podcast with the both of us, hopefully in the same room together.
Yeah,
Maybe
no,
we should
that's
do
gonna
it down in
happen.
Hikka, man. We
Yeah,
gotta
we
do
should
it
do it in
in
Hooker.
Hikka.
Or either that, or we'll go to Uncle's. You know Uncle's in Park Street Mews.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that spot. I love that spot. I love the mural on the wall there. We go and drink some
yeah.
arak cocktails if you drink alcohol, and I'll DJ and we'll throw a party. Why don't we throw a party? Why don't
Let's
we do
do
that?
that. You're on. You're
Yeah.
on.
So we'll do the interview and then we'll go and do an after party at Uncle's.
I'm gonna hold you accountable for
Yeah,
that.
bro, that's gonna happen. I'm telling you now. I'll message the owner and I'll say to him, "Make this happen, please."
Let's do it. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
When we are down here next.
perfect,
Nihal, thank
man.
you so much again, and everybody, thanks for listening in. This is Junkyard Theory.